Hi students. One of the important things that every student should know before going to the examination is verbs considered in ACCA exam. Now, unfortunately, students, this is a key reason why the pass rate is very low. Now, if you see, every student will write the same answer for all the question, irrespective of the verbs. And some students who generally practice a lot of questions may also fail by writing a wrong answer for a different verb. Now, students, why verbs are important? Because each verb, look at this very well, students, each verb has a different expectation. Each verb has a different expectation from the student's answer. So students understand it very well. Each verb will effectively have different expectation from the student's answer. For instance, students, if I say explain JIT and discuss JIT, and also students, if I'm not mistaken, evaluate JIT, the students are generally writing the same answer. And JIT means just in time systems, right? So students, today in this session, we will be effectively learning why the students needs to understand the verbs are important and also how the answers may differ from each verb irrespective of the same model. Subjects which are verbs considered. Students, if you are stuck in the professional level, to be honest, students, you are having a separate problem with verbs because verbs are very critical to pass this examination. Even without professional skills, if you are not much aware, that is not much an issue. But verbs are very critical. And specifically subjects like the strategic business leader, and then students audit and assurance, because students, it's very important. Audit and assurance, in simple language, the advanced audit and assurance. And also students, the advanced performance management is very much thorough with this work. Now if you see subjects like AFM and SBR, fortunately those are technical strong subject, so the verbs are not playing a critical factor there, but still it will be useful if you understood these verbs for the exam application. So students, the verbs are divided into three sections. Level 1, which is the knowledge level verb, students, because I think many students should know this because in future it will be very helpful. So one is known as the knowledge level verbs, keep in mind. And the second one, if I'm not mistaken, level 2, which is the skills level verbs. And students, if I'm not mistaken, a kind reminder, please watch this video in full. The reason is you have to understand the differentiation, especially if you are an exempted student or a student who is effectively doing without exemptions. And the final one, the level 3, is the professional level verbs. So keep these three things in mind, students. Now, if I'm not mistaken, the level 1 verbs, if you see, certain verbs are same. Identify, and then students, if I'm not mistaken, there is another term, list. Identify, list. Okay, students, now if you observe, these terms are generally very same. Now I will use a model, Porter's 5 forces. So students, it will be very easier for you all. And a humble request, students, if you don't know Porter's 5 forces, just have an idea before you watch this video. So identify Porter's or identify the 5 forces, or list the 5 forces. So I can write down another verb, list the 5 forces. Now students, if you observe, for this it's very simple. You can write it in bullets, accepted. And that's what students, the F level, the knowledge level exams are generally bullet based or MCQ exams. So it's very easy, no students. What are the 5 forces? The first force, if I'm not mistaken, is the rivalry. Correct, no students? The competition in the market. Then students, threat of new entrant, that is how much players can come easily into the market. Then students, we have something called threat of what, students? Substitute, if I'm not mistaken. Then if I'm not mistaken, we have something called the bargaining power of the suppliers of an industry. And then students, we have the bargaining power of the customers or the consumers, bargaining power of the consumers. So students understand this very, very, very well because it is just a list. So they are testing the knowledge. That means level 1 verbs, memory power of the students, how much the student is good in remembering things. And then students, there is a verb called describe, if I'm not mistaken. And sometimes it can come as outline also. Now students, in P level, sometimes you may get outline, but this outline will be clubbed together with another thing called discuss. Outline and discuss, outline and evaluate, outline and analysis. So just remember the terms outline. Now describe is very simple. You just need to explain what it is, what it is. Very simple. Just write down the what it is in your own verb. And students, one verb now they don't test is define, because earlier definitions were tested, but now they are reducing that to describe, just giving the students to express their point of view and the critical understandings. So describe, that is outline what it is. Now students, if you observe this very, very practical and very, very clear, you have to understand the following very easily. Now describe and outline 5 forces. So I'll write down here, describe 5 forces. Make your life very simple. Describe 5 forces. Describe 5 forces. Now the explanation comes to the picture. You have to have the heading rivalry. So I'll just write down here the what. Rivalry is the competition in an industry, which makes the business to have price challenges, full stop. That is price war. Within brackets, I'll write down price war. Then students, after rivalry, the next extension is threat of new entrant. Threat of new entrant. Now students, if you observe this threat of new entrant, I'll just make a note for that. So I'll write down here, the ability for new players to enter the market. This creates more competition and affects the business industry. So students, in simple language, we are saying that new players can easily come to the market without any influence. I'm not using any technical knowledge of practical explanation, nothing like that. Now students, the next factor is after rivalry, the threat of new entrant. Then students, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to write down here threat of substitute. Threat of substitute. Now students, if you observe threat of substitute, I'll write down here, this is an alternate product or service. This is an alternate product or service which will satisfy the general need. Example, just for making the explanation clear, pencil is a substitute to pen, because it is providing the same use. Correct now students, if I am not mistaken. Then after threat of substitute, the next one is very simple. That is bargaining power of supplier. So I'll write down here bargaining power of suppliers. This is the influence the suppliers of raw materials have on the organization. For instance, if they are supplying scarce resource, example, lithium battery. Now students, lithium battery is a scarce resource, so that you have to keep in mind. And then bargaining power of, if I'm not mistaken, bargaining power of consumers. The influence consumers have on the company when they have many alternatives, options, they may have high bargaining power. Example, the stationery industry. Because students, paper, pencil, not a huge demand or supply from the consumers, because they will not go for branded item. Whatever that is there, they will take it because effectively they know most of the products are giving the same quality. Students, I believe you have understood the level 1 clearly, and another one that is very common in the knowledge level, if I'm not mistaken, that we effectively call it as calculate. I'll just write it down. Calculate 5 forces. Now in ACCA, the calculation is little different. Now, what does a student do? He'll write 1 force plus 1 plus 1. He'll just add together, and he will effectively say, okay, I have done with the calculation 5. That is wrong. In ACCA, you have to write a small description. 5 is the total forces in the industry. Total forces in the industry. You may lose 1 marks if you don't explain after a calculation. So remember that properly, students. Students, I believe that is very clear for you all at the moment. Now let's move on to the level 2, that is the skill level verbs. And this is very simple. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I will explain to you more in detail. Okay. Now, the next question is explain. Now, students, this is where many students lose marks. Some students, if you observe, they would have seen the same concepts are repeating in all the levels, but the decision-making skills are slowly upgrading. Now, if you observe the previous question, it was describe 5 forces. Now, students, I'm going to write down here the question, and then I will explain to you more in detail. Explain 5 forces. Now, students, the biggest problem with the students is the verb describe. I believe that you are observing here the verb describe in simple language, the verb describe. And for the verb explain, unfortunately, students, the students are giving the same answer. This is where majority loses the marks. Explain and describe, they are writing the same answer. But explain is an extension of describe. You have to always write down what are you explaining, why do you think there is an issue, and also you have to effectively explain the how element of that issue. What, why, and how is the explanation part. Explanation part. So explain 5 forces, students. What I will do, I will copy paste the describe answer. I am copy pasting the describe answer. Students, I believe that you can observe it clearly. I am copy pasting the describe answer. So the same describe here, you see here the rivalry, the same points what is mentioned here. I believe that you can effectively see this. And then students, what I do is I'm just Control C, Control V. Unfortunately, that is not working, but not an issue. Not an issue. So students, understand it very, very well. So if you observe in this case, rivalry. Now, in the previous one, what did I write? Rivalry is the competition in an industry which makes the business to have price challenges. So I'll write it down. Rivalry is the competition in an industry which makes the price challenges due to, now I have to write it, due to price war and competitors reducing prices, and also there is lack of government intervention. Therefore, this will reduce the profitability of the industry. Now, students, this is very important. So I'll just write down here example, example. In simple language, students, I can effectively say farming industry. Now, students, if you observe farming industry, anyone can do farming. You need not take license or anything like that. So in that case, what effectively happens is the rivalry is very high. When the rivalry is very high, people compete with each other. Example like YouTube channels. Anyone can start a YouTube channel and effectively make money. There is no government intervention. So effectively, there are chances that people will be offering things at a lower price also. Then students, I'll just write down the next one. That is the threat of new entrant. Threat of new entrant. Now students, I'm going to write it more in detail. So here, what are the ability of a new player to enter the market? So I'll write down here, the ability of a new player to enter the market, because there is very few rules and regulation to obtain license. In that case, the industry may have difficulties since the new entrant may dilute the market share due to new offers they provide. Full stop. Again, you see students, the extension of a describe is explained. Then the next one, just to make your life easy, threat of substitute. Threat of substitute. This is where the industry is affected by products or services which provide the same intended benefit. Now students, for instance, if pencil can write, pen can write too. Therefore, this is a substitutional effect. Example, a film roll camera or DSLR camera may be substituted by an Apple iPhone camera. So students, I believe that you understood that substitutional effect there. Then after the threat of substitute, then we have the next one students, bargaining power of whom students? Suppliers. The supplier influence on the industry due to lack of or due to scarcity of raw material and due to strong collaboration, where they make the price. For instance, OPEC, oil price control. Now students, you may be knowing countries that exports petroleum is called OPEC. So again, that's an extension. And then students, if I'm not mistaken, bargaining power of customers. When the customers have many alternatives, there are always chances that the customers may effectively have the option to switch to another player. In that case, the bargaining power of customers are higher, affecting the industry profitability. Now, students, you see, what generally as students do is they write a description answer for an explain, or sometimes for a verb describe, they write an explanation answer. But you have to understand, describe is a level 1 verb. So effectively, the marks will be less. But if you observe the explain verb, the marks is generally higher. So keep that in mind for your understanding and application, students. Now, the next verb, which is very, 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 very important, is compare and contrast. So, students, this is very simple, but again, when you're doing the compare and comparison, you have to explain the what, why, and how. Now, students, when you come to the level 2 onwards, this sequence is very, very important on what, why, and how. Keep that in mind, students, for your critical understanding and critical judgment. So I'll write down here compare and contrast. Compare and contrast the fast food industry in UK and India. Now I'll give you an idea here so that it will be very easy. In UK, the rivalry is very high, and everywhere there is a fast food organization. It can be McDonald's, Burger King, or any local outlet. And the market is not loyal to the brand. Therefore, in the UK, the fast food sector is very challenging to manage. Now, that is one thing. Now, you have to contrast, okay? However, so look at the verb I am using. However, in India, there is a brand factor. For instance, McDonald's, although it is fast food in UK, in India, it is considered to be a high-end restaurant where people perceive it more like a social class representation. Therefore, in India, although there is rivalry, still the brand factor plays a critical role. So comparing with UK, India market is generally a manageable market. Students, I believe this is very clear for you all at the moment. I believe this is very clear. So you see how one model is effectively changing according to the question verbs. This is important. And unfortunately, students don't go for that why element because why is the skeptical skill that examiner wants. And today, why has become the most important aspiration that the company expect from the accountant who is coming to the market. Now, students, I think this is very clear. And the next verb, if I'm not mistaken, it's a level 2 verb, but always coming in the examination. Level 2 verb, but always comes in the examination. So students, if you observe this verb level 2, the verb discuss, I'll just come more towards how it will affect. So students, I'll just write down here discuss. Sensible argument. Sensible argument. And students, if I'm not mistaken, I can say a debate. A debate. Balance of opinion. Balance of opinion. Now students, don't worry. Don't worry. I'll make it even easier for you all to understand. When you say a good, consider the challenges of that good. That means when you're writing a paragraph of advantage, don't stop. Just say the challenges on that advantage. You don't worry. I'll explain with the illustration. When you say a bad, or I can say, consider the good aspects as well. That is debate, no students, two persons, the right wing and the left wing. They will be telling each opinion and we balance it off. Now students, I am going to slowly say, if I say these are the prospects, you have say pros and cons, like the prospects, and the bad I can say the constraints. So not advantages and disadvantages, practical challenges. The verb I can use is practical challenges because students, if you observe mostly university students are thinking discuss means advantages and disadvantages. It is practical challenges of your points. When you are doing it should be like a zigzag. So I'll write down here zigzag approach. Now students, if I'm not mistaken, I'll just write down a question for you. So discuss the influence of customer bargaining power in the social media industry. Now, social media industry, I have effectively mentioned that. Now, again, I am saying this zigzag, another term we call it sandwich approach. You write a good, you write a small bad, but you don't explicitly write this is good, this is bad. You diplomatically write it. So, discuss the influence of customer bargaining power in the social media industry. Now, students, with all due respect, I will write down. Now, see, discuss the influence on bargaining power, customer bargaining power in social media industry. So little bit of commercial acumen is needed, understanding of the industry. The customers generally don't pay for any social media platform. Therefore, they can switch to another social media platform. That is the biggest challenge. Does the customer pay money? No, it's free. It is free. Anyone can have a social media platform. For instance, anyone can have a social media platform. Anyone can have what, students? A social media platform from Facebook or Twitter. So that is practical, that is very, very clear also. Nothing to worry about that. Now you have just told no need to pay, they can switch to another. That's again you're saying a challenge. So you have to counter. This paragraph is not over. However, in the case where they have more connections in one platform, they may not easily switch. They may not easily switch since they are connected to their preferred network, their preferred network community, their preferred network community. Therefore, this will sometimes have some more influence to the social media platform, to the social media platform where, 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 where where they can earn advertising revenue. They can earn advertising revenue. I believe this is very, very practical for the students. You observe this very clearly, students. You observe this very clearly because it is giving you a practical insight on how these things work. So this discussion is you tell one challenge and then you slowly make it practical with the current situation. I believe that everyone has got this understanding very, very clear. And students, understand this into your mind. Make notes of other models, how other models can be affected. Like diamond theory, you do have Ansoff matrix, you do have BCG matrix, you have the strategic clock. So try to make sure how these factors can be rearranged and improve your thinking, because this is what the examiner effectively wants. Okay, now I'm coming to the next one, which is the level 3, professional level verbs. So I will write down the verbs which are tested in the examination. The verbs which they test is evaluation, analyze, assess, and another one, advise and recommend. So students, these are the levels of verbs they test in the professional level, which is the P level, students, for your understanding. Now, students, just to make sure your thinking aspects are very clear, very practical at the moment, what I want to say is the similarities in a structure of the answer. When you're doing an evaluation, analysis, assess, advise, and recommend, conclusion is a must. You need to have a heading on conclusion, and the conclusion should give them a futuristic conclusion. Don't repeat the analysis what you have done, your research outcome. After doing this writing, what can be the outcome to the future? Again, understand it clearly, students. What can be the outcome to the future? That is very, very important. Futuristic. Now, the first thing what I want to effectively come here is the next important thing. When you get these verbs, students, exhibit is essential. And you have to do the job of a data scientist. You have to analyze the exhibit data. You can't write an answer with a pre-learned knowledge. Level 1, 100% memorizing. You can go to the examination, you just memorize the notes. Level 2, somewhat you will pass by memorizing. But when it comes to level 3, exhibit is essential and you are a data scientist. So examiner is asking, you have to use evidences in the question to supplement your answer. Supplement your answer. So students, this is the easiest exam I can effectively say. The reason behind that is especially for working population. You don't have time for memorization. So you can effectively focus on thinking very rational to the situation. I believe this is giving you a more clarity to think and apply. So students coming into the understanding, evaluation. So students evaluation, it can be two options. You can evaluate, or it can be a financial extract which you can evaluate. And the same thing goes to assess, analyze also. Now in evaluation, I will effectively give you a small understanding. So evaluate the financial statistics. Financial statistics. Now students, if you observe, I'll just give you an idea. Courgettes. Now in courgette students, the last exhibit, it effectively had a small calculation where revenue is increasing. Revenue is increasing. You can see that. Now, if you are going to evaluate this, you can effectively say the increase in the revenue is mainly because of the new passenger routes, because it is given. You can just go through that. And this data I am taking from the question, and also the drop in the price, which has resulted in the lower of profit. In that case, we can understand that the business needs to consider the future, where they have to understand the segmental routes which is giving the revenue growth. Students, are you clear with that? I believe that is practical and clear. And then you have to give a conclusion. So understand it very well. In this case, you are appraising. And one skill that is important is skepticism for all these skills. You have to think. You have to think. Now, students, coming to this evaluation, you have to check why it has happened and what can be done. What can be done. Analysis is ratio analysis. Students, you would have studied ratio, financial analysis. Why this has happened? Why this has happened? So you have to say revenue has increased. Revenue has increased because of new routes. And in the industry perspective, when new routes are increased, the passenger quantity increases. The passenger quantity increases. The passenger quantity increases. Therefore, in that case, the company can effectively perform well, but the biggest challenge is the fall in the revenue, the fall in the profit. Students, don't worry, but here your answer should be more specifically to the situation, and again you have to end up these answers with a conclusion. Then the next one, students, is assess the changes in revenue. Now, whenever you get this, you have to make the assessment like this. Currently, time assessment, in the medium term, and then students long term. So students, you have to understand currently the revenue has increased. The revenue has increased, which is good because of the new destinations. Therefore, in that case, it will be great. but the price has fallen. So in the medium term, we may have a challenge in sustaining profit. In sustaining profit. Students, it should be more discussion oriented style where the economies of scale can be considered also, because we can ensure there is an economies of scale. Economies of scale can be considered as well. And long term. So students, if I'm not mistaken, I'll write down here. In the long term, if we cannot control the cost, certain destinations will be loss making, and making sure the shareholders' wealth is affected. So students, again, conclusion, you have to write and you have to say some rationale. Again, understand it, rationale. Rationale means futuristic comments. Rationale in a futuristic comment. Future. You are a strategic consultant, so it should be futuristic comment. Futuristic comment. Keep that in mind, students. And I believe that is very clear for you all. And the last one is recommend. And recommend is a sure verb that comes, or recommend and advise. So students, recommend means you have to say yes or no. It's a compulsory. So yes or no with a Y, with a Y, with a Y. And students, you have to say action plan. The implementation is important. You can't say yes, we have to buy this. Then you have to say how we have to implementation. And then students, there needs to be a conclusion. As I told you, the conclusion remains rationale based futuristic conclusion. Rationale based what students? Futuristic conclusion. Rationale based futuristic what students? Conclusion. So students, understand this very practical, understand it very, very clear here. So students, I'll write down here, the company is recommended. Now students, the company can, it is recommended. So I'll just mention that there was a AI. So it is not recommended. It is not recommended. It is not recommended to use. It is not recommended to use AI pilot training for Cojet, since it is a general factor to be considered. For instance, only military uses it. And there is no benefits to the consumers directly. Now students, once you say the recommendation, you have to write the action plan. The business case for the proposal needs to be submitted stating the risk factors are greater than reward. In that case, this can be a major challenge. And conclusion, in the long run, we can consider based on industry, regulations, but currently it is not sufficient. It is not sufficient. So students, I believe this is very practical, very clear for you all. So students, understand it very well. In your examination, the level 3 verbs are tested. And please remember, exhibits is very, very important. And working students, please don't panic because you can use your practical exposure and pass this examination without any barrier. If you have any questions and doubt, please comment below. Thank you very much.